Welcome to the New Masculine Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Stock, and this is a space for men who are ready to move beyond outdated models of masculinity and into something more honest, connected, and whole. Welcome back to the New Masculine. Today, I've got a book recommendation I think you'll really enjoy. Under the Current is the debut novel from Jared Siler, following Tristan as he navigates the pressures of ambition, the weight of inherited silence, and the challenge of embracing vulnerability in a world that often rewards control. The story unfolds like a slowly building pressure cooker, pushing Tristan right to the edge. While it's fiction, I can't help but wonder how much of Jared's own journey informs this story. Lucky for us, Jared is here to walk us through both his book and his path as a man. Reading Under the Current, you can sense his deep understanding of human behavior, which makes sense as he's also a licensed school psychologist. Beyond that, he identifies as a spiritual being, husband, and mentor, roles that clearly shaped his perspective and work. So, Jared, I'm pleased that you're here. Welcome to the New Masculine.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Travis. I really appreciate it. This is like super exciting to be on the podcast and share my novel, my story, a little bit about background with you guys.
Oh, yeah. Well, you were gracious enough to provide me a copy of it, so I got to read all about it and dive into it. So I'm excited for us to get into that. But I think it's best to really start from your own perspective as a man. First, let me ask, is there anything about yourself personally that you would like to share before we get into kind of the meat of this conversation?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I'll share a little bit about my background and how I became a psychologist. In that sense, what kind of got me inspired to become a psychologist, and then also what inspired me to become a writer. And share some of these stories about, especially through the character of Tristan,
Yeah.
as well. And I'll get into. I know you said at the beginning. Is it a little bit more of my story too? There is definitely some of my own upbringing, my own story into adulthood as a man that is into the story or put into the story, but a lot of things throughout my life and people who I've met, worked with, clients of mine who have shared their story are definitely a part of this novel as well.
Mm. That's the fun part about all of us as helping professions. We have numerous stories to draw from when we're helping to tell another story. We can pull from so many different examples of all the people we've talked to that help flesh out a full man's experience, as in Tristan's having in the book.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree with that. Especially, I think I've been blessed to hear other boys that I've worked
Mm.
with as a school psychologist, and also even parents and fathers of those boys, or any student I've worked with that has shared with me their own personal journey as well, kind of behind closed doors. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go into, what is vulnerability through that masculine lens,
Yeah.
specifically in that Western culture and what we live in America.
Okay, beautiful. Well, let's start with your own personal journey from your own boyhood. Start us from like young versions of yourself as a boy, realizing you were a boy, what you were picking up as a boy. Start there for me.
Yeah, of course. I grew up in part of my life in Portland, Oregon. Born and raised Oregonian. Very stable middle class home in Oregon. Two parents, household. Saw a lot of love and different types of love. Communicated non-verbally and verbally, which I think is very important throughout my childhood. My dad was a small business owner. In general, he was very steady, very hardworking, a very dependable man. A lot of humility and a lot of trust with him. He's very honest. So I got a lot of good morals in that sense from him, and saw a really, I think, overall holistic, good male version of a role model for me. I also was around my grandparents quite a bit, both sets of grandparents who lived in the state of Oregon as well. And those two male figures to my grandpas, in a sense, were very similar to my dad of how they raised. Very steady, again, hardworking, dependable people, stable, honest, a lot of, again, good moral values. Um, However, they were not overly expressive emotionally.
Mm.
And I think that is, I've noticed, at least with even my friends growing up too, just not the case a lot of times, especially with masculinity and male figures from necessarily that era and how they were raised. Um, so I got a lot of the emotional expressiveness from my mom.
Mm,
My mom's an extremely, I would call her the emotional center of my family. Extremely patient, nurturing mother, overly kind, always there to help, but also to challenge as well,
mm,
which I think is really, really hugely important. um she didn't I didn't just get everything in life in a sense, but definitely was challenged to do certain things and take risks and then fail, but also learn from that. So my mom was all about the recovery from certain failures, and she really preached a lot of needing to fail, and so did my dad. But my mom was really the one to break it down emotionally for me.
mm,
Why was I feeling like this during certain failures as a boy? And a certain failure could be something as simple as, hey, I got a flat tire on a bike and I went over the handlebars. Something I remember very, very extensively when I was 8 years old, going down a hill way too fast. Tire went out and I slid, filled about 20 feet, skinned up my whole face, right? My mom was there to provide that emotional comfort, but then also talk about what do you do next time, right? To be more careful. What have you learned from these experiences? Got a lot of that during my childhood, and still to this day, I'm very close with my parents, even into their 70s now, and they're still teaching. But my mom more so teaching about those emotions.
mhm,
So I think from that perspective, I'll be honest, I wanted more from my dad emotionally, and not to the same extent that my mom provided me, but I just kind of a longing for like, why only is my mom talking about this?
mhm.
Right, with me. Why
Yeah.
is she a little more open? And I didn't know necessarily as a boy, right, what open meant. But I definitely felt a difference there, right, between that masculine figure and the femininity piece in my household. Um,
That's so interesting to hear you talk about that because there's a often some in the traditional models we think of like moms as the supportive figure and dad as the challenging figure, and yet your mom kind of housed both of those inside of herself.
mhm.
And I know just the way she raised you, it seems like you were destined to be a school psychologist or something in the mental health field. If she's already helping you interrogate and investigate your own emotional landscape, it's like, well, you didn't really have a choice, did you?
For sure, for sure. And it's funny, I never really thought, like think about it like that,
Mm-hmm.
but that was definitely even like her parents, my grandparents, when we would see them in Southern Oregon, and we saw them about 5 times a year. Some of those are my best memories of just being around them and feeling really nurtured, and feeling like I was in a safe space physically, emotionally, mentally, just kind of a what we would call now like peace of mind
Mm-hmm.
type of piece around it. Not that I didn't around my dad or other male figures of fathers of my friends or anything like that, but just a different sense of it's almost like you have to be a certain character
Yeah.
around the father versus the mother. Almost kind of like a chameleon type of piece. But yeah, it is funny. My mom probably did to give me some of those natural psychologist tendencies in there.
Well, there's that interesting thing you're talking about needing to play a character. And it's not that our many of our dads are really well intentioned and want the best for us and want to support us and want to be connected to us. And yet, as you were sort of experiencing with your grandpas that weren't as emotionally expressive, they were raised by men that didn't have those skills either. And so
Totally.
there's sort of that generational lineage kind of thing that shows up a lot in your book also too around sort of the emotional constriction that we as men feel. And I like that you sort of labeled it as like needing to play a character because it is sort of interesting to me how much of our ideas about what we need to be as a boy trying to become a man, how much of it's performance, how much of it is a character that we lay over top of our authentic selves,
Mhm.
to connect in appropriate ways or to make sure that we don't get made fun of or rejected or that we can get a sense of belonging. There is a character element to what we all go through as boys into manhood.
For for sure, and I would 100% agree with that. And I think it was, you talked about the breaking of what I would call the generation cycle.
Mhm.
And someone, in a sense, if they want to, they kind of have to do that. They have to bridge that gap. And I think, in terms of, even in the book, right, Tristan finally does that. In that sense, he kind of thinks about, do I want to bridge that gap? And I think it's really interesting as a male. I mean, I guess I could take credit for myself. I feel like I did bridge that gap,
Huh.
in my masculine generational lineage. Um, and if I was to ever have a child, especially a boy, I think, showing different sides of emotional capacity would be one
Mhm.
of my big teaching moments, of that. But I don't fault. I think one of the biggest things of writing this book too is I don't really talk a lot about faults of that,
Mhm.
right? I don't fault my grandpa. I don't fault my dad or any other male who's going through that, because they're doing the best with what they've been given. And I think that is a really important thing that we don't share a lot of in society. It's more so we just are like, oh, that's who they are.
Mhm.
Well, sure, but that's what they've been given, the tools they've been given, right? And of course, with tools, just like I provide to people in my job, provide the tools, but it's always their choice to use them, right? And in this case, Tristan in the book does decide to use them. Um, but if you don't have the tools at the beginning, you're not really going to have the choice to
Yeah.
to actually try and change,
Mhm.
right? Or try to be more emotionally capable. So I think that's a really important piece that I really I hope we can see more of in society, especially our American society, of just like providing those tools for men and showing that these tools are actually like a safe space to
Mhm.
open up.
Mhm.
But
Amen.
vulnerability is all about belonging, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah, it's so interesting how much we as a culture really value vulnerability in other people most of the time. We like feel safer with other people when we know they're telling the truth, when they're being honest with things, when they're really letting down the guard, but how resistant we are to doing it ourselves. It is a connective tissue that brings forward a sense of belonging in communities, that vulnerability piece. And yet our sort of Western male culture has become more and more isolated and independent and focused on fixing our own problems alone. And Tristan in the book is such a good example of that. You can just there's just so much, and there's a tipping point where it shifts, but there's so much trying to manage it and process it and control it all alone. And I think that was something I picked up on the book, was like, this is what every man is facing, whether you're a gay man, whether you're a straight man, whether it doesn't matter. Most of us have been taught to really isolate with our stress and our problems and our struggles. And
for sure.
actually, the antidote comes in the connection, in the vulnerability.
Absolutely. And I would even add to that, I think it can be cross cultural and
Hmm.
cross ethnicities as well.
Hmm.
Um, through a few of my experiences as well, working with other cultures and other ethnicities throughout my time, and friends too that I grew up with. Um, and yeah, absolutely. I mean, spot on what you said.
Mm. So, you told me in a previous conversation that you started working in your own sort of therapy, maybe in your teenage years also.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about that sort of teenage time frame.
Yeah. So when I was about 15 years old, just before my 16th birthday, so sophomore year of high school, I was the classic kid of popular, great grades. I did three sports, right? Kind of those. I fit into all the like cultural scripts, gender roles that we see in the movies and Hollywood, right?
They could have made
Um,
it, yeah, like an early 2000s movie all about you.
Totally, totally, and that's. But I always knew like, something that was different about me,
Uh-huh.
because I really liked a lot of different, like, areas of life. I loved travel. I did choir. That was very like, whoa, like, you're not a man for doing choir. If you're a jock, right? Because I played three sports, all my jock friends would make fun of me, right? But a few of them always came to my performances too for choir,
Mm,
which was interesting. So I kind of thought, oh, maybe there's something inside like that they do want to kind of break out of their shell.
Mhm.
And what's funny is nowadays, as they're adults, I still am good friends with specifically three of those people who would come to the performances, and they are very much into singing, love
Mm.
karaoke. One of them even does like their own producing of music. So again, I think trying at the time I was like, of course I didn't set that bar for them, but I kind of almost sensed intuitionally that they wanted to break out of that. But I was definitely trying to fit into those cultural scripts, right? But never feeling like I did. And
Mhm.
I'll never forget of sitting in an English class once, and I can't remember what book we were reading necessarily, but there was a character that was we were going over, and I just all of a sudden was like, "That's me." Like, and his character was really going through an emotional kind of ego death
Mm.
almost in himself in the book. And I remember thinking, man, that's so much like what I'm feeling right now. And I had been really struggling. I hadn't really been talking to anybody. At that time in the early 2000s when I went to high school, mental health was not as accessible and as popular, especially for men, as it is even nowadays. And self care, right? All these self help books, that was not the thing at the time. So if you went to therapy or someone knew about that, it was like kind of almost taboo in a
Yeah,
sense,
something's wrong with
especially where
you.
I grew up.
Yeah.
But I knew I needed to do something different. I think this is I test my mom for this and kind of that background of like, okay, something's off. What are we gonna do about it? Right? We got to put some action to that, not just sit back in it. And here's the problem solver also in me, right? Like, so my mom actually mentioned, hey, I've been looking into see for you to see a psychiatrist. And she was pretty much the only one I had really been talking about my emotional struggles. And I was just struggling with puberty plus like I don't know if I fit in necessarily. I don't really I feel really like isolated in a sense at that time, even though I was super social, right? And I was involved in so many different clubs and sports, but and so it's interesting. I was extremely reluctant, very, very reluctant to go to see a psychiatrist because I thought I was gonna lose all my friends. I mean, it's literally
Mhm.
as simple as that
Mhm.
um, and a very teenage based idea. But um, right away, when I actually saw a male psychiatrist, and I think that really helped as well. Immediately, I didn't even think males were psychiatrists
Mm.
at that time. I wasn't exposed to anything like that. My dad had gone through some therapeutic sessions with my half sister when she was in high school, but again, that was a female that did that. So it was like, whoa, there's a male can be in this profession. That's kind of interesting. So that sparked it right away. First session I met with him, and I remember kind of going through that first session by myself and just the language that he was speaking to me. It was very open, very honest, but like very, very safe. I felt very, very safe in that space. And immediately after that first session of just opening up a little bit, I was ready to dive in even
Mm.
more. Um,
You got
and
a
I
taste
think,
for it, huh?
yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think, it sparked not only my interest in the world of psychology, but it just sparked my interest in like, wow, this guy is doing something that he doesn't have to fit into a cultural script, right? A cultural box that we're doing for this masculine role. And he's good. I mean, he's very like good looking. He seems fit. So I mean, he's got to have some other types of hobbies. It's not like in the movies where you see at that time like laying down on a couch and
Uh-huh.
telling me all your problems. Oh, you're this quote unquote weird person in a sense. No, it was very normal.
Mm.
It felt very very comfortable. So that sparked some of that interest in opening up, and I think really paved the road for me through my high school years because I did see that person for 2.5 more years through my high school years. Paved my road to get not only through some of those tough times and some of these dark thoughts that I was going through with dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, which runs in my family. It is hereditary in my family, and but I felt like I was one of the only ones dealing with it, right,
Mhm.
and working around it. Um, and then I would say the last thing I think is very, very important, just like in this book, therapy, when I went through that process, I always thought it was like, oh, fix me,
Mhm.
right? But I think therapy is not necessarily about fixing you because the person has to receive the tools and then do something about it. But therapy is this journey to get these to talk about these things, but also just to open up and feel better, even about talking about them can release a lot of energy from your body, a lot of negativity. Um, and it is more of this safe kind of circular piece that's not just a couple of sessions and then I'm done and now I'm healed.
Hmm.
Right. Healing is this journey. And that psychiatrist really taught me that. And I really, really appreciated that because we do change and over time and things happen to us. Um, but how are we going to deal with it with when those things come up, those other things in life?
Something I really appreciated in the book was how you wrote the therapist character in it. It feels like genuinely how a therapist shows up. It's not meant to be a character there that is sensationalized or that is like hooky or something. Like it sounds like actual therapy. And so I could feel your actual background in this because I find that so often therapists that are either presented on TV or on different or coaches even that are shown in the media don't really represent themselves so well. And I'm like, oh, I would never do that as as a professional. So appreciated the realness of that character and that it wasn't about fixing Tristan. Something I'm hearing in your story that I want to highlight is in many ways, it sounds like you've been kind of a trailblazer in your life. You were like someone that didn't fit the mold of who's going to therapy. You were doing all of the traditional male things, but also doing choir and
Hmm.
inviting your friend and your friends coming in to going, wait, what's he getting to do? You've been sort of like trailblazing all along and yet, in some ways that people might criticize as traditionally feminine, asking for help, getting support
Hmm.
from a psychiatrist, going to choir. And yet, what could be more traditionally masculine than trailblazing and going ahead and setting the pace for everybody else? It's so funny how we get locked into these descriptions of these things are feminine and are for women, and these things are for men. And yet, you're embodying such a masculine energy as you approach that from a really young age.
Well, yeah, thank you for explaining that. I think it's interesting to hear someone else say that other
Uh huh.
than maybe my parents in that sense, right? Kind of saying that, and, that's a very, very mature way even for you as a male as well to recognize that in another. So I give a lot of credit to that, so I appreciate the sentiment for that.
Well, that's the
Um,
kind of thing I'm trying to unwrap in these conversations is these arbitrary boxes that we've put around certain things are available to men and not available to men. I
mhm,
just don't think I just think it's so strange that we put boxes around that and we ask men to leave like intrinsic parts of themselves behind in order to fit in
mhm,
and belong.
yeah,
And yet you can still do these things that break the man box, that break the code of man in a very masculine way, in a very healthy masculine way. Like I just want that's why my encouragement all the time is like maybe we don't have to see it the same way. Maybe we can evolve these buckets to free ourselves up to still approach it as men, but do it in ways that actually free us to have more of a life.
absolutely. I think, in general, masculinity, at least influences to me, are kind of around competence and emotional control. So
Mm,
things like what I was modeled from my dad, which is great, like integrity, and then from my mom, empathy. But those can
hmm
be things that masculinity and males can show, right? Is empathy, taking responsibility, right? Also showing a space for imperfection. Yeah, I
hmm
do like choir. Yeah, I do like to travel, type of pieces, but I'm still me at the end of the day, right? I can be all of who I want to be. How great is that? Right? Like, I feel more whole when I actually am the true self of who I want to be. And why should that be put into a box?
hmm
Why should, quote unquote, and I hate that word, but our society uses that a lot, right? You should do this. Males should go into business or should be a surgeon. Well, what if you don't want to, right? Like that's such a hard piece. I mean, automatically you're setting up someone to fail greatly emotionally. I mean, mentally and inside their body. That's going to create a lot of stress to not fully express who they really want to be.
hmm
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think we can pick up a little bit on like your own personal journey is starting to
Yeah.
lead you towards the career that you want to be in. So tell us now about like why you wanted to get into being a school psychologist, and maybe what your life is like now as a man?
Yeah, great question. It's been a whirlwind. I would say the last probably 20 years, almost of my life now it's been since I got into college, and I've always been driven. That's just how I was raised too, but just internally for me. I got into college. I was like so type A in the sense of like, oh, I got to get a psychology degree. And then I also have to get a business degree because I wanted to do a dual because one wasn't enough. Right. But like,
Classic
uh,
overachiever, got it.
yeah. And I think that some of that too, right, can play into some of the stuff that I had earlier on in my life,
Hmm.
with that anxiety piece of being an
Yeah.
overachiever. But definitely saw myself as a clinical psychologist. Remember the first day ever sitting in class, in Psych 101 at University of Oregon, and I was like, this is the first day until the next 9 years, right? Like I'm going straight into clinical psychology to get a PhD. And just that mentality right there, looking back, really kind of set me up for like, man, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself,
Totally.
right? But as I've gone along, I think into my journey of learning more about the psychology career and then getting into grad school where I went into University of Denver into child psych, I really kind of saw my junior and senior year of undergrad as I don't necessarily want to work with just adults, or in
Mm,
that clinical setting. I really enjoyed working with children because I think that's where what helped shape my life too, and where just learning more about the development of a child really, really is a key part of life. And it was so fascinating to me too. It's like, cool, I can work with kindergarten through basically all the way through high school. That's a really, really interesting kind of spectrum to look at. And so I was really fascinated with that more so than even adults because I wanted to make more of what we call like an early impact,
yeah.
on people as if I could, right? And teach them those tools that I was so grateful of learning from mostly my mom and some of the feminine figures really in my life growing up. So that's really how I got into the world of psychology, and becoming a child psychologist.
Now, what makes you dive into being an author also?
Oh man, I had an English teacher, AP English, Mr. Divalbis. If he sees this, shout out to Mr. Divalbis. But
Shout out.
he really just a cool male, like
Mm,
just a guy that was very free spirited, but also grounded. I don't know how else to put that, but just basically like a great mentor,
mhm.
and a really really cool person in general. And I loved books growing up. My dad is an avid reader. We've had a library in our house ever since I was, yay big, like super super young. I can remember. So always reading really plays into, my life and my upbringing. And so I've always really liked English class. I've always felt like writing was my best subject in school. And so I remember sitting in Dalibus's class and just like as I was writing papers, I'm like, I can do this someday. Like I really want to do this. And I love stories in general and learning about how the world works. I've been like that since I was extremely little, as much as my conscious thought goes back. I can remember just loving to figure out how the world works. Like I said, that problem solving ability and problem solver in me kind of comes out. And so I got the sense of kind of, man, at 17, I'm gonna do this someday. And at 19, I really found a book that I'm not gonna say changed my life because that's a pretty dramatic way, but definitely opened up my senses and kind of my creative juices, I'll say, to I can definitely do this. And I really do want to do this. And shout out to Jake Ducey, who actually went to the University of Oregon too. His book called Into the Wind is my favorite book of all time. It's a very independently published book, but it is a fabulous, fabulous story of his journey as a man as well, and just as a human being, in his earlier 20s. And just his writing style was very similar to how I wrote short stories, in classes, and even and through college, and took some creative writing. types of courses too, and just really enjoyed that. I loved philosophy. I
We
loved
got 2
thinking.
book recommendations on this podcast today. We got yours and we got Into the Wind by Jake Ducey. All right. All right. It's a book heavy episode.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, Jake Ducey's book. Yeah, shout out to him. It's a great book. If you guys ever see it, Into the Wind, definitely get a copy
Yeah.
of that too. But yeah, just kind of getting into more of that and into my philosophy classes in college too that I took and was inspired. And so I started writing actually a story similar to Under the Current in about when I was about 25. I
Mhm.
started doing that. And then just got that writer's block. I had other things going on in my life. And really from 25 to 30, really, really becoming more of that. What is it to become an adult man?
Yeah.
I went through a lot of really unique experiences and trial and tribulation types of pieces as well. And then now into my 30s, I was just like, I started writing it again. And um, it just sparked in me 3 years ago. I attended a writing retreat, in Guatemala, and it just came.
Mm.
It literally the creative juices, there was no writer's block, and it just came, and I saw the story, and, um, yeah, it just flourished from there.
Wow. Similar to Tristan's a writer in the book too, the main
Mhm.
character, and a lot of his writing is often like words that flow through him, not necessarily ones that he thinks he's choosing at all times.
Totally.
So interesting. So as I listen to you, I hear some of what I wondered about, like how much of you is in this story. And it's like
Mhm.
maybe some of the details of the relationships are different and stuff, but there is
Yeah.
so much of you woven into this character of Tristan that is sort of
Mhm.
intrinsic parts of yourself you get to see on the page.
Yeah,
There
for
is
sure.
that interesting timeline around sort of like the 25 to 30 where many of us we were okay, I'm an adult at 18 and then now I'm a man now and I'm a full grown adult, and there is a confrontational time in our late 20s usually that does put us through trials and tribulation that does ask us to step into more of ourselves as adult men. It's sort of like, okay, you've been playing adult for a little while. Now it's time to get serious about it. Now it's time to get real
Absolutely.
about it.
And I think it's interesting too, I'm in a field. We spend 50% of our day at work, most
Ugh,
people, right? And 50% of our life elsewhere, in our personal life. So 50% of my life mostly is in a female or feminine setting. I'm in
yeah.
a career where, I mean, I've worked for multiple school districts in my career. Even one where I was the only school psych that was a male.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
to get, it's interesting to, but also learning more about who I am as that male, right? I think I also gained a lot of nice access and learning from other females
Hmm.
of parts of myself that I wanted to better and
Yeah.
improve.
Yeah.
Not just professionally, but personally. More so that authority, like what does authority mean? What does empathy mean? And then how do I communicate better, both non-verbally and verbally, professionally and then personally as well. So I really credit a lot of my colleagues to helping with that too, and showing them a different side also that it's not just a one box that's all male that
Uh-huh.
they work
Yeah.
with too.
You and I have so much overlap in that because of my background as a social worker and now as a coach. They're pretty female dominated careers. I've been in as a social worker, been the only guy in my unit. And then I am the only male instructor for the coach training that I teach for now. Like, and sometimes we have our cohorts look like mostly women and oftentimes maybe one guy. I think we have two in our current cohort and we're like, whoa, two of you. Wow.
Totally.
And so
Yeah.
I would agree with you that there's a lot to learn from feminine leadership from our female counterparts. That if we can sit in those spaces, we can evolve what leadership looks like, and they can help bring another layer to it. Doesn't mean that we have to get rid of all of the sort of traditionally male or masculine types of leadership. It just means that there's maybe more to it. It's sort of like what we were talking about earlier about we don't have to section off traits and styles and approaches for men and women. We can be wholly expressed beings, and we as men weren't necessarily taught those skills in our socialization, and so we do need
Right.
to create spaces like you and I are doing where we're teaching those skill sets or passing what we've learned from our female counterparts in our fields along to other men as well. Um, but it's about more wholeness rather than telling like, it's not subtractive, it's additive, I guess is maybe how I would say it.
Absolutely. That's a really good way to put it. I like that a lot. Yeah, it's Julia, the character in the book. What you basically just stated
Uh-huh,
is how I summed up Julia's character.
uh,
And actually, I love Julia's character. I actually wrote her character first
mm,
because I think, at least in our society, we see a lot of men, quote unquote, in power, especially in America. But I've always kind of seen, really, I mean, since I was very young, I kind of felt like women were more steady, more rational, more composed. That's how I learned about leaders, like, in history class too, how they were kind of and generals and wars and stuff, right? More steady, more rational, more composed, not impulsive, types of things. And it's interesting, Julia's character in the book portrays that, right?
mm,
And kind of going through and teaching Tristan some of those, like, kind of calling him out in certain times, but teaching him some of those foundational basics, of what you were just speaking about. And then he's even transitioning that later in the book onto one of his friends,
uh-huh.
another character in the book. So it can really go up the line, and it just starts with that one mentor that is really huge. And I think learning from female characters in our lives, and female people is huge.
Yeah. Hearing you today talk about your mom and the balance of energy she found in herself and how she brought you up, I hear a lot of her in Julia also. She's able to be an empathetic support and also challenge Tristan as the main character, ask him to look at things a little deeper. So I hear her
Yeah,
in there too.
yeah, it's interesting. I actually never pictured her, and when I was writing it, not about my mom,
Yeah.
it kind of I was pulling it from some of those female coworkers too that I've worked
Yeah.
with. And but yeah, definitely she can
Well,
fit in that.
and the main character has a mom that's also very similar. She's also very able to hold space and
Hmm.
not pressure, but also encourage and also challenge a little bit. So you write the female characters well. Instead of as a man looking at a woman, you write from within the sort of female perspective. And I really appreciate how you do that. Since we're
Thanks.
kind of dabbling into talking about the book, let's talk a little bit more about it. So tell
Yep.
us the sort of give us what Under the Current is about. Give us a little overview of it.
Yeah, so Under the Current is it's in a sense a psychological thriller, a kind of a literary modern psychological thriller, where it's based on a man, Tristan, who's kind of this young to mid 30s AI executive. So living in Silicon Valley, he's got it all. He's got the prestige, he's got the career, he's got the smarts, he's got the money, and kind of, but he's going through a tumultuous type of big deal, that he's going to set apart with Monterey County, down in central, coast of California. And they're instituting this new AI, development and project that Tristan developed himself. And from that, it kind of starts spinning in a sense out of control, where instituting a couple of the female characters that he is working with and their ability to kind of vet that project, as it may have impacts on the ocean down in that Monterey County area. Um, he kind of spins into this tailspin of, man, do I actually really want to do this, because it could hurt the ocean. Um, and in general, it kind of that sparks his own, man, what's going on with my own head. I know, am I really living my true self? Is something kind of internally wrong or mentally, emotionally wrong with me? And from there, it actually, events start unfolding, through the next few chapters of this family lineage that he is finding out about, specifically through his father's writing, and during a recent visit home, to the Pacific Northwest, where he's from in the book, also pulling from where I'm from as well. And from there, it really sends him into, who am I? Oh, I have a lineage of this male figure who actually wanted to be something that he wasn't in his life. Am I kind of doing that exact thing? Am I pulling into from my family and masculine family lineage? And he's got to make this choice of does he want to do that or not. And from there, he actually ends up looking at some therapeutic types of ways around that and dealing with and healing from some of the things he's going with. But it shows this dichotomous type of character of balancing, is something really going on with my own inner critic and something that I've been told all my life I shouldn't do, or am I going to be my true self? And from there, there's a nice little twist at the end where the AI project that he's developing, as well as some of his own writings that he's been doing to cure himself and heal himself into the person he really truly wants to be, they come together as one, and it ends in at a really really good spot where I think it's a what I love about Under the Current is the ending the most, because it's a real ending. It's not necessarily, oh, he solves this problem, he marries this girl type of thing. Not necessarily at all. It's very. I tried to make the book and write it more real life
Hmm.
still going on. He's this new person, but does he have to be quote unquote changed all the
Hmm.
time? Does he have to be this completely new person? Right. I think that's a difference of it can be scary, I think, for some people, when we hear, "Hey, go into therapy," or "Man, you should heal that part of yourself," or show vulnerability, right? More so, it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a different person." And so I won't give away the ending, but through Tristan's journey of finding his realness, he doesn't necessarily have to be exactly this new person, but it's interesting who he does become and who he
Hmm.
shows.
I appreciate that you wrote it that way because it takes some of the pressure off for somebody that might be on a personal development journey, that might be seeking help through therapy, or that might be just reflecting on themselves. I think that can feel a little overwhelming, or we can bring up defensiveness and resistance when we expect ourselves to fully change and be a different person on the other side of it. We can grow, we can expand, we can learn new skills, we can process things, and we can also still be rooted to who we are. I think there is that, and you can feel it in Tristan. There's an unmooring. There's a part of him that's really worried about how he doesn't
Right.
recognize himself as it's building, and I think that's a very common feeling for most of us when we're going through something. Is that, will I know who I am on the other side? The unknown feels so scary, and I
Mhm.
think with this story and how it ends, it gives us the space to see that the unknown doesn't have to be so intensely, drastically different. It can be evolved, but not
Right.
so completely reconstructed in some new way.
Exactly, and I really appreciate you saying that. It's so many times, even in my job, I talk with kids and talk with parents, especially fathers of sons, who I work with, and they don't necessarily want to heal certain parts of maybe like their son needs to do, in a sense, or it would help them to do, right? Because it's, oh, I don't want my kid to be completely different,
Mhm,
and be this. I don't want to take away his personality. And I really, really tried to write this book in a sense of Tristan is still Tristan at the end of the day. He has a new possible outlook on
mhm.
ways of life, but he is still him. His personality is the same, right? His likes are still very, very similar. He just has a different way of approaching and dealing with his emotional capacity to deal with certain things in his life that come up.
And a different approach to feeling seen or being seen by others.
Totally.
That, I think that can feel really scary for a lot of guys, that we wanna, you were talking earlier about in your own childhood, like the character we have to play,
Mhm.
the performance of manhood, that actually being seen for who we really are can feel really scary. Because what if we're seen as weak? What if we're seen as
Mhm.
not a good enough man, not strong enough? Like all those ways that our early socialization and the way that we tease each other as children, as boys,
Yeah.
um, we might prove some of those things that our childhood taught us to fear. We might prove some of those right. And so being seen is such a like vulnerable and intense thing. And you can see Tristan's discomfort with it and also
Yeah.
building a comfort with it.
And I think it does help in Tristan's sense too. It always helps to have people in a sense who do quote unquote see you, right?
Mhm.
And it could even be something as simple as a pet. I know
Hmm.
his pet
Yeah.
plays a huge piece
Yeah.
with not giving too much away in the book, but his pet plays a huge piece of the story and how he is seen and how he is comforted, um, through even another character that comes up that's within himself.
Hmm.
So it's funny because sometimes being seen is also accepting, do we want to be seen? Do we even like who we've become? Or do
Hmm.
we like what we are saying or showing the world? Right. And so I think that's a huge piece as well, of acknowledging that in ourselves.
Yeah. There's a specific sort of theme that plays out in the book that I want to kind of talk to you about because I'm actually seeing several of my male clients going through it. And the ones I'm thinking of are actually right in the sort of age demographic of Tristan and sort of that either late 20s, early 30s kind of time. And something I'm talking a lot about with certain clients is okay, I'm on this certain track. I'm building success in my career. It makes sense.
Hmm.
It's stable. I'm married. I have some of them have kids, some of them are on the process of having kids. And yet they're questioning, do I want to be on this track? And so much of what Tristan's going through is sort of like he's on the precipice of like legacy, like building something that actually
Yeah.
he's known for and on this track that he's always wanted to be on and successful, and yet quietly he's unraveling internally and not sure if this is what he wants or if this is how he wants to express himself or how he want what he's interested in. I think I hear a lot of men doing this, that we've been given these tracks to follow. We're climbing corporate ladder structures, we're finding financial success, we're getting the spouse and the house and the kids and the we're doing all those things, and yet
Right.
there's this part of me that is uncomfortable or is empty in some way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, even in myself, I've experienced those pressures.
Mhm.
I think in general ways, I've been lucky enough to receive help. Like I talked about my therapy, I've done other types of emotional like retreats in a sense to really not only explore but express who am I in that sense, kind of doing some self exploration. I think that's really huge, and I would encourage anybody, man, talk about something that's vulnerable, going to like a retreat to learn about yourself. Whew, as males, man, the first time I was extremely guarded, right, with
Mhm.
that, but just learning so much in a safe space too about that. I do see, you talked about all the check boxes, right,
Mm.
that males are put into, and I think it's hard to continue to be genuine,
Mhm.
in that sense. And I see that not only in my own life as I've gone through it, but a lot of people we see on TV, who we meet in person, especially in those corporate ladders, because it is so much, especially in our culture, it's driven so much by your value equals your money, or your value equals your power, or how you are seen, your ego, right? If I could give some advice to males too, it's like finding out, is your ego really what you want to be your legacy, or do you want to step back and kind of have, ooh, maybe my ego's leading me in a different direction. And if you don't know what that ego is, do some exploring on what the ego is,
Mhm.
and what kind of is driving you to even do this still, especially with like something that feels a little off in your body. And hey, maybe I am building this legacy, but I'm not fulfilled doing this. Like that's a tough place to be, in that sense. But I can assure you that on the other side of it, you will be okay if you do go the opposite way, and really leaning into, maybe I do need to do something different in my life, and it is going to be really scary and it's going to be uncomfortable, but does not last forever. And I think
Mhm.
that is one thing that, as a society, especially with males, it's like if I change anything, I'm just that for the rest of my life type
Mhm.
of piece. And
Mhm.
I really, with Tristan's character right at the end, like tried to not show that in a sense. Um, but just, I think it's about building balance. It's about being authentic to yourself while also being authentic to, what you put out in the world, and feeling good about that. Um, and it's not going to always be like this awe-inspiring moment. I think it's the small wins, the little things that you do every single time to really make yourself feel, when expressing vulnerability and genuineness and being emotionally open, that do help in those situations.
I'm glad you wrote a male character like Tristan because not every guy is ready to reach out to a therapist or a coach
Right.
or to go to a retreat. Quick plug: I hold men's retreats involving horses. So if you're if that sparked your interest, I am holding another one. So stay tuned for 2026 dates. So not every guy is really ready to ask for
Mhm.
help or to dive into a men's group or to find like really direct ways to receive that support. But sometimes reading another man's story is enough. And reading Tristan's
Absolutely.
story, you feel him go through that questioning and that internal agony of what that I may be misaligned. I may
Right.
be coming from a place that isn't really aligned for me. And as you said, it doesn't mean that his where he lands at the end of the book means that he's some drastically different person, that he's now wearing his linen pants and is on a yoga retreat every single day. Like
Right.
it
Which was
doesn't mean
totally what I thought it was gonna
yeah,
be, like, when I did
exa
that at 20, I was like, "Man, these people are very different than me," right? Like,
uh,
yeah, totally, no. I
yeah,
still came out wearing my Nike shorts, I still came out wearing, my Oregon Duck sweatshirt, like, I'm still me, it's okay.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's the thing that I appreciate about the way you write him and the way that you're talking now is that I love giving permission for men to be themselves. It's just now like making sure that you're in right relationship with yourself and then
Mhm,
seeing what you create. Like so much of your book aligns with my core philosophy, um, which is in my coaching practice, which is around let's take all the external measurements of success away. You can keep working on those if you want to in your own time, but in our work together, let's take those away. Let's get you in right relationship with yourself, and then let's see what you create from there. Let's get curious about what would happen from an aligned place rather than from a misaligned place, because so many of us are creating from our egos, so many of us are
totally.
creating from our fears, from our wounds, from our what we're trying to avoid. And yet if we could actually create from our desire, from what feels true from us, from like a soul's calling, like why not
Absolutely.
go in that direction?
And I think, man, so much of what you just said resonated, and I think what I would explain that as too is we create from our past a lot.
Mhm.
What's gonna be our present, right? Like, what we have right now, what we're feeling right now, how can we sure, we're gonna learn from the past, but what I'm feeling presently right now, what do I want my future to be like in a sense based on my present? I don't have to listen to my past. And even I'm talking lineage with this, right? But like it is feeling comfortable with yourself, like you
Mhm.
said, right? And leaning into that comfortability, it was what impacts the future.
I think that's exactly why I, as a professional, moved in the direction of coaching rather than continuing down the track of maybe becoming a therapist myself. Is I often see therapy as, I mean, we're sister fields, so we borrow from each other, our
Right.
skill sets. But I often think of therapy as like kind of if there are things from your past that impacted you that shape who you are that are unresolved, how do you process those to help improve your current situation? Whereas
Mhm.
I think of coaching as who are you now and where are you going? And so with my clients, I obviously talk about, oh yeah, you can see where that pattern shaped you from how your dad talked to you. Okay, now as this version of yourself, the person that's in front of me, how do you want to shape the energy moving forward?
Totally.
And so I really like that. I think men respond to that, that it's not about going back to blame mom and dad for all your stuff and to get stuck talking about the past. I think it's informative information that helps us bring compassion to ourselves, helps us understand where we came from.
Mhm.
And I actually really liked about Tristan is he's processing sort of his lineage and generational trauma. It's not about blame. It's about seeing it for what it is, accepting it for what it is, and moving forward in his own version of how he wants to show up as a man.
And he even expresses that through one of the therapy sessions,
Hmm.
with one of the tools of the hate letter, which
Hmm.
is a really powerful moment in the book,
Hmm.
one of my favorites, and definitely even something that I give out to my older students as well to do.
Mm.
So pulling from that, yeah, it's 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 really, really fascinating in the sense of where Tristan goes in this book, and it is I hope my hope was to be, inspire people, especially males of all ages, to really, like you said, kind of take what your past was, but really building those skills and what am I feeling now, and how do I move forward from here?
And the book does it very well. It's a really beautiful read. It's inspiring. It is emotional. It's empathetic. It's connected. And yet it's not, I don't think men are going to experience it as like an overly feminine book or something that they don't connect with because it was written like from a feminist perspective. It's written from a man's perspective. It is
Totally,
definitely a man's book. And yet it invites us to bring in some of those skill sets and some of those ways of processing that maybe weren't given to us or taught to us because we were boys growing into manhood. So, thank you for writing such a beautiful book that gives people permission to start on their own journey, to continue on their own journey, to see another guy in his own journey. And because now that we're talking with you, we can see there's even parts of your own journey that are woven into this. So, it's not
right,
just
right.
a fictional character. There's a real person that is doing some of this work in the background.
Absolutely, yeah, I appreciate it. I always think of, like, the Lewis Howes, like, what's your story of greatness, right?
Hmm.
I think there's 2 things that I'd like to leave, and 2 of my mentors in my adulthood that I've been very, very blessed to have learned from, some of their teachings, and number 1 being Tony Robbins always talks about blame is not a way to greatness, and I think one of the things with our society and what I would love to talk about is don't blame yourself, don't blame others, right? Take accountability for what's gone on. Um, but you have the choice to create what you want. You are given
Mm,
that path. And we are all put on this earth to serve a specific, I believe, a specific purpose or purposes. And everyone has impact. And if you lean into what you truly feel in yourself, especially as a male, and it could be that vulnerability of just being who you really are, no matter if, no matter what your gender, race, no matter what. If you lean into that and don't put blame on it and just be yourself, that's I think that is the path to greatness. In general, and I don't necessarily mean greatness and monetary value, right, or things or anything that you get, but just being fulfilled.
mm,
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is very much out of my own heart, right? As a psychologist, fulfillment is on top of the pyramid, and of course you need those foundational pieces and those social skills to get there. But to feel fulfilled, some of my greatest moments in life have been free or
mm,
just parts of where I felt the most freedom of my life, and they didn't cost anything,
mm.
right? They were those realization moments. And what a beautiful thing when you feel that realization of being who you really are. And then secondly, I would say to Brene Brown, I mean, her work with vulnerability is unbelievable.
She's the
I've seen
goat.
multiple times, but how real she comes across,
Yeah.
and really teaching, I think inspiring even myself to preach, and I appreciate you saying that I'm preaching
Hmm.
my own journey and hopefully being a beacon for men as well as of course yourself, right? To be part of that person of who you really are, and not be afraid of that and leaning into it because on the other side of it, we're all just trying to belong,
Yeah.
right? But belonging to
Exactly.
yourself first is so important before you can belong to something else.
Heck yeah. Belonging to yourself. Beautifully said. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Jared, for joining me, for sharing your own story, and for sharing your book with my audience. I think people get a lot out of this book if they read it. So it's Under the Current. If they were interested in getting a copy of your book or learning more about your current writing, but maybe even future writings
Uh-huh.
or anything about you, how do they find you
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
world?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Al. So yeah, got a copy of the book right here. So Under the Current, it's out on Amazon right now. Just as Under the Current or under Jared Siler. I also have an author website as well, jaredsilerauthor.com. You can learn a lot more about the book, myself, and then also I got some blogs up there to just some of my kind of future teachings from the book as well,
Mm,
and some other things that we, as men, maybe would like to dive into. in terms of emotional vulnerability and spiritual vulnerability that I write about in there. So check out the blog on my website. And yeah, I you can get it now on Amazon, and I think it's at Barnes and Noble as well. So
Oh, beautiful. All right. I'll
yep.
make sure there's a link in the show notes so that people can find it super easily and find some of what you're writing too now in the blog. So check it out in the links below. Thank you so much, Jared, for spending some time with us today, for sharing your story and the story of Tristan so that we can all feel inspired to continue on our work. If you're interested in connecting with me, you can go to my website at travisstock.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Travers03. That's where the conversation keeps alive. So if you have questions or things you want to react to this episode, at Travers03 on Instagram, and we can keep the conversation going there. If you're liking the mission of this podcast and you want to become a contributor, you can go to patreon.com/thenewmasculine. That's patreon.com/thenewmasculine. Thanks again, Jared, for joining me. And until our next episode.